Hey guys, Spencer Smith here, host of Self-Funded with Spencer. Today's episode, I'm sitting down with Scott Smith, no relation, for a roadshow version of the podcast in Alabama, where we talk about the origins of true network advisors. Check it out. So Scott Smith, why don't we say, hey, where we are, what we're doing, and introduce this totally one-off version of the podcast. So you mentioned just a moment ago, we are in Guntersville, Alabama. So why don't you describe geographically for people that don't know, where exactly are we and what makes this city unique?
So the pronunciation, first of all.
Did I say it wrong?
No, you said it right.
Okay.
This is what's funny. So it is Guntersville, right?
Okay.
Guntersville.
By the way, my phone keeps wanting to autocorrect Guntersville. It doesn't believe Guntersville is actually even spelled correctly. Yeah.
So when I am out traveling around the country, I kind of talk like this. I can't hide my Southern accent.
Sure.
But it's not as pronounced. So Guntersville, and if you really want to say Lake Guntersville, it just sounds better because there's a beautiful lake around here. But if I slip into my Southern accent a little bit, it's Guntersville. But the T will be in there. But if I'm really, really at home for a long time, not traveling, it's Guntersville.
Okay.
So it's Gunners.
Yeah.
But we're in northern Alabama.
Okay.
We are about 45 minutes due south of Huntsville.
Okay.
About an hour and a half northeast of Birmingham. At the very foothills, and I mean the very trailing foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And so Lake Guntersville is the largest lake in Alabama. It's 69,000 square acres. It's a very large lake on the Tennessee River. Population around 8,200. It was probably around 7,900 when I graduated high school in 1988. So I was gone.
So not a huge population.
Not a huge population boom.
All.
Well, the town is a peninsula, so we're surrounded on three sides by water. There's nowhere to grow, really. Mm-hmm. And so I left right after high school and moved back about 11 years ago. Okay.
And so you told me as I was getting the mini tour of Guntersville yesterday, and we got a chance to get to know each other, that this is the number 3 I'm pointing for the folks that are listening audio only behind us. I'm pointing to, this is what you said, like the number 3 bass fishing lake in the country, in the state. Like what was the?
Yeah, in the country. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
whoever came up with
that rankings.
I had some buddies who are like, what is it, number 4? Like, come on, be honest. How do you know it's number 3?
I would say top 5 pretty consistently.
Okay.
We have anyone who happens to be into bass fishing. A lot of the pros live here because you can fish pretty much year round. There's deep water and shallow water, and there's shelter, and there's different kinds of grass, and there's boathouses. So you get to fish all different seasons, all different types of bass fishing. And so it's been this mecca for a while. The Bassmaster series comes here a couple times a year. There's a competing league now called Major League Fishing that is actually headquartered here.
Major League Fishing, so pro league, and like how often are these guys? Is it is it a league where I'm going head to head with you on one weekend and then against another guy, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'm gonna disappoint a lot of my local friends here.
You don't know, do you?
In that I know a little bit. Okay. So the Bassmaster League is the oldest one. It's been around forever. And then Major League Fishing is only a couple of years old. And they're competing leagues. And there's a little bit different rules. The Major League Fishing has tried to interject some more exciting, more I guess, progressive rules to the bass fishing.
Okay.
I don't know what those are.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
the audience, if they're interested in Major League Fishing, go look it up. But I think the bigger reason we're here, right, is not the lake. This is the home office of True Network Advisors, which is the purpose for the podcast. So let's be honest, we're gonna talk quite a bit about that. But you've been very gracious to let me come in to town to see you, to get the tour. We've talked shop, we've talked skits, we've talked business, we've played around with creative ideas, and then of course the main purpose was to shoot an episode of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast and tell the True Network story. So I'm very gracious that we get to do that today, and hopefully the folks that are watching, we've got a beautiful background behind us. Britt, your creative director, you have an in-house creative director, is a stud. And he set this up, and so big thanks to him, man. So why don't we start at the beginning before we go into True Network Advisors fully, and I want to hear the story, the origin story, how it's progressed over the years, the pandemic, all that stuff. Tell me your work history. Tell me like where you started in benefits.
Okay, and I'll try to make this as short but interesting as possible. I started in 1995 in Atlanta. So I had gone to high school and grew up here. Actually grew up in a suburb of here. If there could be a suburb of a town this size, I grew up in a suburb. But, I ended up in Atlanta and ended up in the individual life insurance business because I didn't know any better. I was suckered into a straight commission sales job. I had to wear a suit to the interview. I didn't own a suit. I had to go out and buy a suit.
Okay, you bought a suit?
For the interview, and they took me to this cocktail lunch, and they were drinking martinis at lunch. And I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen.
I want this job now.
And so they brought me back in. They gave me this offer. A lot of people in our industry will know. They told me about this TAP program where you had to draw against commissions that you would sell. And, we've talked about this. I grew up very poor. I didn't know anybody that had any money. Literally nobody. And I was in a city where I knew no one. And it was really, they threw me to the wolves. And I quickly found out I was terrible at selling individual life and disability insurance. Okay. And there was a guy in the agency, his name was Paul Lee. Paul was tan all the time. He smiled all the time and laughed all the time. He drove a Mercedes. And he had this office over there. And I knew he did something different, but I didn't know what it was. And he was our group benefits specialist at New England Financial. And at that time, New England Financial actually had a little health product that was administered by Health Plan Services in Tampa. Long story short, we were the only people who could sell that health plan. Small group. And so I said, can you show me what you're doing? Because I'm terrible at this other. He's like, sure, let me show you how to cold call. And so he taught me how to cold call for health insurance renewals. And I was young and naive and probably dumb enough to just do it. And so I cold called my way into the employee benefit business. I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know dental, life, disability. I knew that I had this list in front of me, and I would say, hey, Spencer, this is Scott Smith with New England Financial. I was just curious if you would take a competitive quote on your health insurance when it came up for renewal.
And you go, maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then I got better at cold calling. I actually, progressed at tips, and I actually taught a cold calling class for different parts of my career.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, so you must have been like really good at cold calling then.
I think so. I mean, when you're young, now I do have a theory that there are only so many cold calls in the human body. Like you may have 1,200, I might have 22,000. They may have 11, I don't know, but you just...
At some point you hit a wall and you can't do it anymore. What, you just get so dejected by it, or you just tired of it? Like, what do you mean?
I think it just... Yeah, and you probably get to a point where you think you don't have to do it. It is hard, right? If you think, the old algorithm 10-3-1 system that some people might know out there, you basically would make 100 phone calls to get a client. That basically, the math said, if you would make 100 calls, that would equal one client. And then you say, well, how much is one client worth to me? Okay, it's $2,300 in commission. Well, okay, how many of those do I need to call to get 100 of those? And you just back your way into it.
Okay.
So you learned how to get past the gatekeeper in cold calling. I can remember, so this is going back, but I learned that if I would, like on a Monday when I knew everybody was busy, I would just call and someone would say, they would answer the phone and say, this is ABC Construction. I would say, oh, hey, who is this? And they would say, this is Julie. I was like, Julie, hey, can I have, oh gosh, what's your HR person? What's her name? Karen? I'm like, yeah, could you give me Karen? What's this regarding? Oh, you know what? I'll call her back later.
Yeah.
And then I would jot down Julie, answer the phone. Karen is the contact. So I'd call back like a week later and I'm like, Julie, what's up?
Yeah.
No, nothing. It's like, hey, this is Scott Smith with New England. I need to speak to Karen. Would you mind putting me back there? And you just had better success.
Yeah.
Get it, right?
Well, because you treated it like it seemed as if you knew her, or it seemed like you needed her, and like, oh, I should put him through, right? Like clearly he's got something he's got to talk to Karen about, right? So, but that's like, I actually saw a guy talk about this. I think he's like an Instagram sales guy, and he talked about the confused salesperson. It's kind of somewhat of a tactic. It's like, can you, and he'd kind of stall and stumble, and the person would be like, they'd want to help, right? It was like this natural human inclination to want to help you solve whatever you're trying to spit out. And that's kind of like a miniature version, I think, of what you were doing. It's funny. So you developed an art. You realized you had a skill at this. So you got started in group benefits. Did you realize you enjoyed group benefits a lot more than the individual space? Or, was it just really, hey, I happen to be kind of good at it and I can make some money? Yeah,
at that time in my career, I didn't know anything. It was just I was able to make some money. And I was pretty good at it. I was selling groups. Quickly, you learn a little bit through osmosis, right? You go through the process. I'm only quoting one carrier. So you have a couple of opportunities. They're like, well, can you sell me Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia? And the first couple of times I was like, I don't know, So I had to realize actually, and then there was, United Healthcare, or who were the carriers back then? US Healthcare, Aetna, Humana. I'm trying to think of those, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia in those days. There were like 7 or 8. So I learned the carriers. I learned dental insurance. Then you learn, there's this thing called life and disability. But it was really just a commodity sell. It was price driven. It was just me outworking people. Mm-hmm. I had these 2 full boxes of X dates or renewal dates, where it would get to November renewals. And I would pull out the big stack of cards, and I would just kind of call through them. Hey, Spencer, this is Scott. Remember, I called you back in so-and-so, and you said you would take a quote. I sent you a business card, asked you to keep it. Like, would you talk to me? And you just talk your way into an appointment, and then you try to provide them a competitive proposal. That's really how I got started.
That's the old days, right? And that's kind of that old days of what people consider a broker, right? Now everybody's sort of repurposing or rebranding themselves as consultants, right? And it lends to maybe there's more of a sophistication of what I'm doing rather than pulling note cards out of a box and handing them renewals. So when did you kind of evolve into, because I know you have a lot of self-funded skill sets. So like, when did you start discovering that in your career? So
I'll cliff note this. So about 2 years into that New England experience, they came to me and said, hey man, you're gonna have to start selling life insurance or you're gonna have to leave. And I was like, I'm way better at the health stuff. And they're like, well, you can still sell health insurance, you just can't have an office here. And so went home, had an office in the basement. I formed Metro Benefit Consultants.
Ooh.
If I wish I had that business card, it was terrible. Like I can still see it. Like I don't even know how.
What did it look like? Can you describe it?
It was like, I had this terrible graphic of like a skyline.
Okay.
And it had NBC as the kind of a logo. It was terrible. I mean, awful. Long story short, we had our first child at the time, and my then wife was from Alabama. And when she was pregnant, she had a breakdown and was like, I've got to move back closer to home.
Okay.
And I even said the words, hey, I'll move to any of the other 48 states, plus Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia, but I can't do what I do in Alabama. So Alabama has this weird thing with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama. They have a direct sales force. They don't use brokers, and they don't pay commission.
Yeah.
So it was like, I can't do this here. So long story short, I moved.
Long story short, she won. And I moved. Yeah.
And then that really forced me to start learning, right? So I got over here. I kept my groups in Atlanta for a little bit, but I was like, I'm going to have to learn this larger group market. I'm going to have to learn voluntary benefits. There were several large enrollment firms based in Birmingham. They still are there. I didn't know stop loss at all. I had to, okay, what is this, right? And so, through desperation, really, I started learning large group consulting. And then that led through, a myriad of me searching for the right opportunity. I finally landed as a partner. Northwestern Mutual, back in the day, had these employee benefit operations where you could be an equity partner in the operation. The managing partner of Northwestern Mutual would own the business, but you got a pretty substantial equity stake. It was one of the best deals in America, and we complained because we didn't know better back then, because we had no business risk, but we had equity. And I helped grow that practice for about 10 years. We grew a nice practice. And in that time was really when we and I often use this phrase, which is people don't often put innovation and Alabama in the same sentence, unless it's football related.
Yeah.
But we were doing captives and on-site, near-site clinics and carving out pharmacy, even things like telemedicine when nobody else was doing it. What time frame was
this?
Like when was this? This was probably early 2000s.
Okay.
Late 90s, early 2000s, starting around 2002, 2003. I can remember talking to Andrew Clayton, one of the principals at Pareto. My first demo with them, they were at Berkeley, and we wrote one of our first cases. It was one of the first 20 or 30 cases that Pareto had ever written in Alabama. So whatever year they started, that's about the year we started looking at captives.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, I mean, you definitely started much earlier on. It seems like it's swelled in popularity now. I mean, there's obviously a lot of captive managers out there, and it seems like that subject matter is being presented more often nowadays. I don't know if just the market's finally come around to the concept, or it's reached critical mass in terms of the way that the number of solutions that are out there. But was it tough selling and understanding captives early on when the market probably didn't even know what you're talking about? To a degree, or what?
A couple of things. A memory just came flashing to my mind.
Okay. Good or bad memory?
It's just a memory. It wasn't terrible, but I was in a meeting in Decatur, Alabama, with a big prospect, and was talking about captives and pharmacy strategy and things like that. And the guy looked at me. It was a very savvy CFO, and said, "You're out here taking arrows, aren't you?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "We're probably not going to do this. I get what you're saying, but it's probably too advanced for us right now. I'm not going to get my owners to understand it. I think you're going to have a hard time with these strategies in Alabama." And it was like, whoa, am I taking arrows? It kind of feels like that sometimes. But it was just what we knew. Like it,
Chances are you're probably one of the only ones talking about it though, right?
So yeah, mostly in the early stages, yes.
Okay.
Again, being in Alabama, brokers caught up pretty quickly. And someone finds out you have a captive solution, they're knocking on the door like, what's he doing? How's it successful? Same as us, we copied a lot of people too. But I really never loved details, right? So one of my strengths is I can take a concept, understand it really quickly, high level, and then I would say articulate it, but regurgitate it in a really understandable way, right? So I love the concept of the captive, right? And I understood early on that it was you sold it as a concept first, you didn't spreadsheet it, and then you recommended it.
Okay.
If it was the right tool, right? Early on with captives, people would say, here's your fully insured renewal, here's a level funded option, and here's a captive option. And it never makes sense that way, right? You just can't sell it that way. And so I learned that you sold concept.
Sure.
And then you recommended it. And then what I learned I had to do is I had to go get someone operational and with a finance background that explain it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that led to some success early on.
Well, I think you're right though. I've done a little bit of that with stop loss too. And somebody said a similar thing. It's like you have the ability to take a concept that's pretty technical and difficult and make it simple enough to understand. And I did it in bite-sized form, right? But it's like you have to go, all right, I can speak underwriter, I can speak finance, but at the end of the day, this is a concept that I have to be able to convey to somebody that's being introduced to it for the very first time. So it's not dumbing it down, but it's making it a little more practical to explain it, right? And I think, like you said, if I can just explain the concept of a captive to somebody and they go, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Then they're going to want to go, okay, now I want to see it, right? Like now I want, but if you went and just whiteboarded a captive and all the like layers of risk, they'd be like, I can't do this. So you're doing captives, you got into the benefit space, you're now doing large group here in Alabama. How much time frame was that before True came about? Like how many years were you kind of in practice as a consultant? This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com.
That was 2000 until 2012. No, we sold our practice in 2012.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what'd you do then?
So I sold our practice in 2012, almost for a full 2 years. I had a 2-year agreement to run the benefits practice for the firm that bought us. That was miserable. Some of it self-inflicted, right? I was not as mature. There were a lot of egos at this company that were competing. There were politics.
Yep.
And I've since had some people apologize to me that were involved in that situation. But, you look back and we're like, I could have handled that way better. But in the end, I left and took a consulting job at a firm in Birmingham for not even a year as I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And it was during that year that it was 2014, where I really had the idea of True.
Okay.
And then we launched True November of 2015.
November of 2015. Okay. So I want to talk about the entrepreneur angle for a minute, because I asked you, I think it was we were driving the other day, it's like, How did this drive come for you? Like, I mean, obviously you were clearly successful as a salesperson early on. You were willing to put in the work, but I always want to understand kind of the psychology of the person. Like, where does your drive come from? Was it instilled by a parent? Did you pick it up? Was it in you? Like, where is it?
I don't know if I'm going to have a good answer to this question. Okay. I can try.
Okay. Well, part of the reason I asked is you said you grew up pretty poor.
Yeah.
And I think that probably acted as a powerful motivator, but I want to hear it from you.
Yep. Well, so I did grow up really poor, and it's almost a source of pride in a weird way. When I take you to the airport tomorrow, I'm going to take you by the little trailer that I grew up in.
Okay.
I've had some people come in. Steve Noodleberg, who's a friend of mine, he's a business coach in Florida, cried when he, like a tear appeared in his eye when he saw where I lived growing up, especially elementary and middle school. But I didn't know I was poor because I went to this very poor rural school where everybody was poor, perfectly happy. It wasn't until I got to middle school, my mom made me go to the city school, which is Guntersville, Alabama, right? The city school. Okay. I cried. My best friend and I cried. And I was like, wait a second. You know, I was a pretty good athlete, so I was going, like, spending the night with people on sports teams. And I was like, oh my gosh, these people are rich. Now, these houses are small ranch houses that I see now, but I think, we are made up of our past experiences. So for sure, growing up like that, but also my mother instilled reading to me. I think I might've mentioned that earlier, but I was a voracious reader growing up. I mean, from a early age. Mm-hmm. And that opened up the world to me. I do think it's a singular part of me, is that I was able to have a good, even though I was poor, I was able to have a good vocabulary. Mm-hmm. I appeared smart. I was a smart kid, but people viewed me as smart. And so I was a good athlete. So I was around people that were successful, and I would see them have things, and I certainly wanted them.
So was money part of that, though? Do you think money was a motivator sort of extrinsically to you as a lure? Or did you just go, well, I just want to be successful and I don't really care about the money, but I know I want to get out of here, right? Was that part of it?
I think it was money.
Okay, that's okay, right? It's a powerful motivator.
At that time in my life, I think it was, I want that.
Okay.
Right? I want the things that I was never able to have. It also drove terrible spending habits a lot of my life. Like, a lot of my life, and I say this because if somebody's out there, like, hopefully it will resonate with someone, but go to Disney, sure, put it on a credit card if I didn't have it. Oh, we want to take that vacation to Jamaica? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Put it on a credit card. Oh, taxes? I needed all that money. Put me on a payment plan. I was reckless because I just believed I was going to enjoy life. And how bad can it be? I was poor. If that's the worst that I'm going to have, like, I'm okay with that.
But did you have a mentality you feel you could outsell any situation?
Oh yeah, I was super arrogant around that. I really always thought I could just sell my way into more. Yeah. And I pretty much did. I would just always sell my way into more and then live with that same lifestyle, which created unbelievable stress and anxiety. It was really silly. And I've been fortunate to be able to make up for that in the later years. I probably wouldn't have handled it really well if I would have been bestowed wealth at a young age either, though.
Well, that's fair enough. Yeah. And so I know you mentioned reading as an avenue out for you, and some of it was vocabulary. I mean, you remember you brought up the word impetuous yesterday. Yeah. Your mom, she didn't tell you what it meant when you asked what it meant. You went and looked it up, right? So it was this curiosity and thirst to kind of understand language. I think that's what helps you be a good salesperson, quite frankly, being able to articulate things in a way, communicate things well to other people. But was the reading also just an escape mechanism, or I could read about anything and learn about anything, and I knew that if I just expanded my horizons, I'd have the ability to do whatever I want?
You're a good asker of questions.
Oh, thanks, man.
I believe for the most part it was an escape, and I enjoyed it. And so I was reading Stephen King books at way too early an age.
Yeah, you tell me you're like, so a lot of what I read is you use the word trash, which
it was terrible. I mean, so all I read at that time was fiction. That was it. I still read about a book a week, probably on average.
A book a week? Wow,
yeah. And about 1 out of 5 is a good book. The other 4 are fiction, trash fiction. And when I say trash, not like trashy, sometimes very well written fiction, but also sometimes not. Sometimes it's a series of Dave Robichaux, a detective in Louisiana, or the Gray Man stuff. I just read all that whole series. It's not great, but to me now it's an escape. It is my time. So I read every night where I just disconnect. I don't think about work. I don't think about anything. I read and I go to sleep.
Well, I think most people would agree, right? Even if you're reading for entertainment, pretty much everybody would agree that reading is better than just sitting there and watching TV for entertainment, right? You're letting your brain at least do the work, visualizing what you're reading.
Man, I am a strong believer in how fiction can change people's lives, in reading a lot, because I think it's underestimated how when you read so much, you're reading about different parts of the world. You're reading, a book might be set in Brussels or Albuquerque, right? Or Portland, or Vancouver. The topic might be around a coroner's life, or it might be around a farmer's life in the Midwest. And so you pick up so much general knowledge.
Yeah.
It's incredibly valuable.
And so do you think that reading, let's kind of bring us back to True, right? Because I want to talk about the origins of True. Do you think that undergirded your ability to, or your desire to go out and be an entrepreneur yourself? Like, not maybe just the reading, but all the things, all those life experiences up to that point, you knew that I was ready to go out and do my own thing, right?
Yeah, a couple of things led up to it. You mentioned the word curiosity before. I do think that's a big part of whatever we call success. You just want to figure out how things work. You want to, it's like a puzzle. Just want to figure out. It might be an event, an event agenda. It might be helping an agency figure out a problem within their operational structure. And so just being curious, I think, is a big trait. And I think that reading probably plays a part in being curious, because when you're reading, you're anticipating what's coming next. Especially if you're really reading a lot, you pick up on nuances and foreshadowing, and you're thinking, and there's a little bit of curiosity involved in that. But I was also just around so many good people. A blessing in my life has been, and I have really always tried to be kind to people, right? Like my underlying corporation name, and your audience might know it, but mine does, is K-KAW Inc.
Okay.
And it stands for kindest. Kindness always wins. And it also, the silly side is, if you say it, it's like caw-caw. It sounds like a bird.
Was that the Three Musketeers were like caw-caw? Yeah, how they would call each other. That's funny.
Sometimes I've got a great relationship with my local banker, and I'll call and she'll say which account are you referring to? And I said, a business one. And she's like, which one? And I'm like, you know which one, you have to say it. And she's like, don't make me say it.
Don't make me say it.
And we have a thing, and she'll say, caw-caw. But, there have certainly been times in my life where I was not always kind. But as I've matured, and when you name your company that, it's out in the open, and so you're accountable to it. I've had only a handful of times that I've called people back over the past 5 years or 6 years at True and say, hey, I was not kind. My reaction to what you just did, I'm not saying I changed my position maybe, but I certainly handled that badly.
Yeah.
And so the curiosity and the kindness, I think, led to, I was pretty well respected in the industry. I was in this crazy state of Alabama, did pretty well. I was nice to people. It was kind of funny when we went to events and engaging. And I had enough people that believed in me when we launched True that said, I'll sign up, Scott.
Yeah.
I've got some confidence that it's going to work.
Yeah. It was kind of trust in you at that point. They were willing to go along for the ride. But what about the inception of the idea? I know your audience of folks that know True Network are going to understand, but maybe some of my audience might not know exactly what True is. So could you explain it very quickly? True Network Advisors. Okay. What is that?
So True Network is a group of independent employee benefit agencies. They pay dues to True to be part of our organization. They're members. We call them members. And in turn, we push out an overwhelmingly large amount of services and partnerships and innovative ideas and collaboration. We exist to help independent benefit agencies be better. The very altruistic beginning of True was like, hey, I want to collect agencies that are doing cool stuff, that want to tell all their secret sauce ideas because they want to get everybody else's. And it's not like, every small business, everybody's reinventing the wheel all the time. And I'm talking about, which benefit technology should we use, and how are we going to vet all these out, and what are my job descriptions? What does my account manager job description look like? What does it say? Can I build something where when we hire someone, they've got 3 positions to advance in my firm, so I can really get some entry level talent in? Like, everybody's always reinventing the wheel. We just happen to be in benefits. It's like, that's kind of silly. We don't have to do that. And so True was built on the premise of, let's get really cool agencies together that you'd want to hang out with, and they'll share all their good ideas. And in the very beginning, because I was a peer, like all I've done my whole career is employee benefits, I could tell what was good. So I wasn't having to have a committee vet out, they're selling captives really cool. They have a really good compliance process. We'll teach it at our next event, right?
Yeah.
And so
you were helping with some of the operational efficiencies it might take to run a business or scale a business, right? So presumably some of these agencies had good blocks of business to start. They had some really good people, some really smart ideas they could sell. They had decent strategy, but were they looking to maybe reach the next echelon, if you will, of agencies, and they needed some help getting there? Yeah.
Well, we resonate with growth-oriented organizations. My nature is growth, right? It's hard. I'm a salesperson at heart. Even as an agency owner, and now as the president and CEO of True, I'm still sort of sales and growth driven. And so we resonate with growth-oriented agencies. People who want to sit on the block of business don't enjoy True very much, because we're always talking about growth and sales and ideas and innovation. So yeah, we continue to attract those kind of agencies that hey, we want to grow. We might want some help. We're good with giving our ideas, by the way. And we've layered on stuff throughout the years. We have a ton of good strategic partnerships now that are meaningful to our partners. We've got proprietary programs that we push out to them. We've got a creative department now where we're doing some really cool stuff to actually move the needle on their organic growth, like helping them directly sell and retain business, not just be an association with events and all this stuff and kumbaya and hold hands, but we're actually moving the needle by some proprietary programs. And so,
is there a profile of agency that you look for, a size agency, maybe the size of the block of business or the number of employees, or is there a sweet spot for you where they go, that's the right type of agency for us? This podcast is sponsored by PlanSight. PlanSight is a technology for employee benefits brokers to more efficiently manage their RFP process for any group size, all funding types, and over 20 benefit lines and point solutions. PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP technology on the market today. Let's modernize your RFP process together. Check us out at plansight.com.
And so it's a pretty wide, here are the characteristics: growth-oriented, independent, so not part of a big national firm. Typically between 1 and 10 million in revenue. I say typically. We've got some that are much larger than that and some that are smaller. It's really about the leadership. Now, to be fair for our current members, I'm not going to go out and add 10 tiny firms as our next 10 members, because they would look at me and go, we're not getting anything. We're giving to those firms.
I see.
Right?
So it has to be reciprocal.
Yeah. But you want to bring on small firms so you can help them grow. Just like some of the very large firms that are part of us, they're probably getting the most out of it, what we're doing, because they can scale our ideas and concepts. They can take them and put them right to work. But you want that mix. You want that healthy mix of young, aggressive, growth-oriented small firms and these very mature firms who have a lot to give, but also still want to grow.
Yeah. When I see, I had Lee Lewis, he's the head of the Health Transformation Alliance on, and we talked about, because he deals with jumbo employers, like 5,000 lives and above. And he was saying those employers, it's sometimes difficult for them to execute on new ideas because they have such scale, but they're spread so thin across the country. They have other restrictions, maybe political restrictions, all sorts of things. Like they can't do the things that the 100-life employer can do sometimes. And so it's actually probably interesting for those big agencies to go, oh, here's what the little guy over here is doing, and that's actually pretty cool. Like I think we could do that, but you said we could scale it at the same time.
It works in the brokerage world too. I spoke at a SIA event last year, and I think the topic was small, mid, and large brokers, who has the advantage. The answer is nobody, but it made for a pretty good conversation. We may do it again this spring. But so a very good friend of mine in the South, he was a peer for a long time, and they sold the organization to a large national firm. I'm not going to name any names. One of my mentors, maybe the best salesperson I've ever known, like one of the top 1% of our industry. But he said to me recently, we're like a battleship, man. Like we can't, he said, I miss the old days when we could just have an idea and go do it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that is, small to mid-sized firms have that advantage. Now they have sometimes a capabilities disadvantage because they can't say we have 47 attorneys in the Southeast and 3 actuaries and medical. But that's
an interesting dichotomy though. It's like, how do you continue to maintain agility while growing, while scaling, right? And do you reach a tipping point where you have to accept that you lose one or the other, right?
Yeah.
Is that everybody goes through that sort of thought process, right? Like,
yeah, we don't have any firms I think that are that big yet.
Okay.
Our largest firm might be 20 some odd million in benefit revenue, and that's still small enough to be innovative and growing.
That's fair.
Now, once you get to a certain size, it gets hard. Something I did want to say this because we started to talk about this, and then I went off another direction. You were going to ask me the origin of True.
Yes.
It actually wasn't even my idea, so I can't even take credit for this.
Okay.
So this is muddy. People have different versions of this.
Well, you get the mic, so you get to tell your version.
So there was another peer of ours in our large group that we kind of had big study groups. We were all involved with these Northwestern mutual agencies who sent an email out that was like, hey, let's get the band back together and have a group together. But he was really wanting to sell something, right? He had an ulterior motive. He had a product he wanted to sell. And so we had a kind of a study group reunion. There were 8 of us that were in this study group for a long time together. It was really impactful to all of our lives. So if I can remember all of them, I'll recognize them. John Monahan at PDCM in Iowa. Eric Serrano was in Milwaukee. I'm just trying to name the guys first because it was mostly ladies, which is the whole reason we're successful, by the way.
Okay.
And then Val Stremsterfer, Intrepid Denver, my fiance now.
Yep.
She didn't like me back then, by the way.
She didn't?
No, actively disliked me.
Oh, yeah.
Actively. Liz Freyer, Intrepid Atlanta. Jackie Crane, Benefits Texas and Dallas. A woman named Carol Rappaport who was in Albany, New York. And then Dan Templin and Alka Sura of Intrepid, California joined as we were wrapping it up. So anyway, it was a really tight group. They did some employee licenses, the employee navigator license together way early. Like Liz might have been the 3rd broker ever to buy employee navigator, and then we all leveraged her license. We hired the same ERISA labor firm on retainer for all of us. So it was really a study group on steroids. Anyway, they were bemoaning the lack of collaboration. And some of them had been to other national organization meetings recently. Not going to mention any names. We know who they are. They were just like, the culture wasn't right. Val coined the phrase that our industry is male, pale, and stale.
Yeah. Oh, she's the one that coined that phrase?
Yeah, that's Val.
Because I've heard that 100 times.
So that was Val's.
Industry.
And it spread like wildfire. And I am very male and very pale. So
you're not stale.
I'm not stale.
You're not stale.
I am 2/3 of those.
Yes.
I think so. But it's true, our industry is, the average insurance agency owner is probably 64-year-old white dude, right? And so they looked at me and said, Scott, you're not doing anything right now. Why don't you start one of those? And that was it. But then I was evaluating job offers. I had an offer from, I think, USI to run the Southeast, and was really close to taking that. Flew out to Houston, and I was like, man, I'm going to be a terrible employee. I think I've established that in the last couple of years. What about that little network thing that we're talking about? So I took about 6 months and I studied the existing associations that were out there, small and large. And it seemed like there was this hole of none of them were run by employee benefit people. Like none of them were like run by a sort of fanatical EB person, a lifer who wanted to get nerdy on the EB side. They were like associations, cool people on all these spots, by the way, smart people, many of them smarter than me in some of these places. But they weren't run by a peer. And I was like, I think that's the big difference right now. So anyway, I could go on and on about it. That was the origin story of how True got started.
Yeah, and so it was really just a desire to bring these people together, to have an affiliation, an ability to sell, share ideas, right? Which I really genuinely appreciate. the openness to share ideas and not feel like I've got to keep it so close to my vest that I don't want them to steal mine, right? I think that's really cool. And I think our industry is starting to do a lot more of that. So, that was 2015. Obviously, a lot has happened between now and then.
Yeah.
But talk to me about some of your growth. And I do want to spend some time on the experiences, on the events, because that's how you came on my radar, is seeing kind of some retroactive looks at your events that you posted on LinkedIn. I'm like, what's going on? That looks really cool. Yeah. So can you tell me some of that?
Yeah. So, just sort of in retrospect, I think we just added our 71st or 72nd member agency. All organic growth. We don't have a sales team or a sales department. We do have 16 members now, but it's been phenomenal growth. And that's with, over that same time frame, losing 10 or 12 of those clients to acquisition, selling to large houses. We've only lost one member since inception. It was just like, I don't think it's for me. Ironically, in Birmingham, Alabama, kind of an individual life guy who I've known forever that just was like, I know. I love you, Scott, but not enough just to hang out with you and pay you some dues. So we've only lost one member so far, knock on wood. And we expanded. I talk about our partnerships. We really treat our partners different. So a lot of people call them vendors or vendor partners. We call them strategic partners. And so we will take only a limited number per the segment of the benefit ecosystem. So only a couple of ben admin systems, only a couple of payroll, only a handful of ancillary carriers. We just believe that having a smaller number lets us be a good partner to them.
Yes.
We don't put them like in a conference hall for 3 days, and if you wander up to them and they're selling you on the wares, that's demeaning. We do our very best to make them part of our events. So we'll typically have one members only session, and then everything else we invite them in.
Cool.
And so they're sitting. We even teach a class on being best practice for a strategic partner. Like, go sit with different people. Here's how not to sell them. Right. Stop selling. Just build some relationships. And we built this really cool culture around those strategic partners. And they have been a huge part of our success. And then we have some time to be innovative. So we have a sales process that we invented. Is that that's kind of
created? Maybe created. Yeah, created.
We invented. We created a sales process. I think I want to patent it so I can say I invented it. We have a really cool compliance, legal, and retainer program. It's really the best in our industry. And then we have these crazy events that you've seen some of what we're doing. And then now we're actually getting directly involved in the marketing and branding aspect of helping.
Well, yeah, and I got to peek behind the curtain, got to participate in a little bit of that. But I feel like with those events, you've created something where people see it and go, I want to be a part of that, right? So you talked about you don't have an outbound sales team, referrals, or people just going, what's Scott doing? I want to go talk to Scott. And they find out yes, I'm in, right? So you've created a vehicle where you don't even really have to sell people to join. You attract the right people that want to join already, right?
It's been the coolest thing. It still is incredibly cool. We have a super team now. One of the best things that we've been able to do is we have a very small team of 6, but it's just an incredible team we have at True, and our members recognize that. But then beyond that, the events were, we were pretty good at that right away. Now, the first True event, I had no idea what I was doing. There were 19 people crammed in a room in New Orleans at the W in the French Quarter. It was not good.
It was not good?
It was not good. But quickly, our next meeting, our True Learning Academy that we had in Chicago, was pretty good. I got obsessed with it. And then from then on, I became obsessed with these events. And not just events, but experiences. How can you make it where someone comes to your event and they can't imagine not being part of it?
Yeah.
And a lot goes into that too. And of course, we've gotten way deeper into this. Number one, you have to attract the right people, right? Because I say it all the time, because I still am the primary person that will talk to a prospective agency. I'm like, I can sell you all day and tell you all these words about our culture, and you have to see it. But when you see it, you're going to know, because you feel it. And so we created that as the people we attract. So we try to get these growth-oriented people who are kind and smart and giving. And then we put them on stage. We say, hey, Val Strimsterfer, who's a crazy good compliance office, just talk about your compliance process. Or Jackie Crane at Benefits Texas, talk about the way you built an intentional culture. Talk about the way you hire. What tests do you use to screen new hires? She has an ongoing hiring process that's it's just really cool. Put put those people on stage and let them present.
Yeah.
And then you do all the things in an event, from the attention to detail we have, where the food is really, really good. Every drink is a top shelf bar. We actually will survey members on their favorite type of cocktails and make sure like we have Hendrick's gin if they love Hendrick's gin, right? Mm-hmm. If they like a certain kind of tequila, we'll have that. That's meaningful, right? Yeah. We even did things like we would name cocktails for our strategic partners. So we've had like, it's basically an old fashioned, but we called it like the principle of the matter.
Okay.
Right?
I like that.
Or the true blue moo from Mutual of Omaha.
Mutual of Omaha, yeah.
Or like when Equitable was AXA, we had ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies, right? Just things where you're like, make it personal.
But you make those people feel valuable. They
are valuable.
That's what I'm saying. But you let them know that you know they're valuable,
yeah.
right? And that's a difference in just treating them like a vendor versus treating them like a strategic partner.
Yeah. And we've done things, we'll create a buddy system for guests. They don't necessarily know it. Now it's getting harder because we have more guests. We got to make sure the buddies are dialed in. But not everybody's an extrovert, right? Now if you see 300 people at a true event, 280 of them are extroverts, most likely, 270. But there's a great number that aren't. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to identify that. And if it's a guest that's an introvert, so we'll take a member, try to make sure personality they'll fit in. They say, hey, James, you have Doug. If you see Doug by himself, right, just go over and make sure he's having a good time. So you just take, small kind of steps to make sure that everybody feels welcome, that they feel appreciated. One of the better compliments that I still get is that, so recently we had an event and I introduced all the agencies and their principals. And I said something personal about everybody. I didn't practice, I didn't rehearse, I knew it, right? And we're getting to a point where it's harder and harder to do that. But I make it a point to know the people that we're dealing with.
That's cool.
And that's meaningful. When you can say, hey, Kyle Blastman, Benefit Alliance from Agora Hills, how's your girl Rosie, right? Just had a little daughter. How many people know Kyle was named after a race car driver, right? And so you just pick up these things, and that's curiosity. It's a little bit memory to make sure that
for sure.
It's making people feel special.
Yeah, I know, and that's important, man. It really is important. And so I want to talk to. I think we should probably progress towards the end of this. I know we've got other stuff we got to do, and we're probably losing light a little bit. But
we've got good lighting right here, man.
We
probably look cute right now.
Well, you think we?
Yeah, I think we do.
Sweaty. I'm making sure got these lights all hot. But I want to talk. You mentioned current state of True, which is what 71 agencies, right? I know you're a growth oriented guy, so we're gonna have a future state. Well, I know you have a goal in mind of where you want to be in the next few years. And so talk to me about some of those targets or what you want to achieve. And then if you hit those milestones, then what's next, right? Is it more growth, or are you going to continue to evolve as well?
We're on a mission to partner with the most innovative companies in America to fix health benefits, one plan at a time. NavMD has created a blueprint that delivers world-class benefits to 155 million Americans. Better benefits starts with data intelligence. Our platform is empowering the next generation of advisors to zero in on opportunities to optimize the plan, build the right team, implement proven strategies and solutions. Join us on our journey to revolutionize health benefits. Let NavMD put you a step ahead.
So, probably for the next podcast, I'll have to talk about Patriot, because there's we've had formed a private equity backed entity along the way. Okay. That is, it's part of the fabric of who we are now. And they will acquire agencies that, if they acquire a benefit agency, they are part of True. Okay. And so we have this dynamic now where we want to keep the health of True by adding as many independent agencies as they acquire agencies. So right now, about 2/3 of our agencies are independent, and about 1/3 are owned by a singular entity called Patriot. And so with that, we're going to grow by 12 or 15 agencies a year. Or more. So what keeps me up at night is, how do I keep our culture with that growth? So if let's say we're 71 today, and we're going to add 15 a year net. Well, let's say it's 13 a year net, because people are going to sell or whatever. We'll be at 100 agencies in 2 years. And keeping that nobody competes with each other, it becomes just super hard, right? So it subtly changes the direction of the company. What we're committed to, this is what I tell anybody. I had a call with a prospect this week. I'm like, man, I don't know what, after 5 years, if anybody tells you they know what's happening, they're lying.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've got 5, 7, 8 years where we're going to pour so much into these agencies with ideas and innovation and fun and energy. We've got many firms that have tripled, that are foundational members that have tripled in size since 2015, 16.
Wow.
Some that have doubled in size since 2018. Like, what we're doing really works. And we're just going to keep doing that. And if we get to a point where it's too big, we'll kind of look up and say, okay, how do we handle this?
I was just say, do you feel like there's a ceiling on what you can do and still retain the culture of True?
Things will change at some point, right? I think this is me trying to predict the future. But if we're 140 agencies at some time, it will be more about who is best at taking advantage of what we're doing, right? So we'll be coming, hey, we're still gonna pour into you. Matter of fact, we're really better at it now because we have more resources and we're growing. One of the coolest things about Patriot, it has provided us a lot more resources to invest into our agency firms. So all the event stuff you're seeing, all the lights, camera, action stuff that you're seeing.
Crazy, man. You do it right.
We're doing cool stuff and we're gonna do better stuff. But yeah, at a certain point, it will become a different company. As long as I'm around, I'm gonna do everything I can to fight to keep our passion for helping independent agencies grow. And we'll reassess, I would much rather have our problem be, how do we handle the growth and the richness of 140 agencies rather than we're down 40% and trying to figure out how to hold on.
Sure, yeah. I know growth is a problem, a good problem to try to have to solve around. I totally agree with you there. So let me ask you this, right? Let's say you build True exactly as what your original vision is and you go, we did it. What do you do? What do you do next, right? Have you thought about not only say the end of your career, but where you kind of wind down? What do you think happens then?
I don't think there is a we did it. I don't think there's ever that moment. Okay. Because I did what we started out to do. We did that. That was so low. I had such low aspirations. That was just, I was going to build a lifestyle business originally. I didn't have these grandiose ideas. Now I'm in love with solving problems and helping people grow. And so there is no end to that. I'm in this land of football. Nick Saban is pretty big around here, right?
Yeah.
But his teachings are so business relatable because he talks about the process, right? It is not about winning a championship. If you focus on the outcome, you're always going to lose.
Yeah.
Right? If you focus on the outcome, so if I focus on getting to 125 agencies or 140, what I will lose. But if I focus on helping agencies grow, how do I work with and we really pivoted a little bit to also, we do a ton of personal development to help the people in the agencies grow. There's never a lack of demand for helping people become better people. And so you fall in love with the process. You fall in love with having a better event. Mm-hmm. You fall in love with building a better sales process, a better retainer program. How do we better scale operational efficiencies? Can we find commonalities we can teach around? So I think it's, if you love the process, you'll do it for a long, long time. Yeah. Until you don't enjoy the process anymore.
And that's when you know it's time.
That's when you know it's time to do something
Pass
else.
the torch or do whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why don't we end on a story? And I'd like if you don't mind indulging me in sharing the story. You showed me a video yesterday that I really thought was cool. It was the hashtag INeedIt story. So would you mind telling that story for the folks that haven't seen it?
Yeah.
I thought it was great. There was a little bit of sentimentality with it, and it was during the very, very early peak of the pandemic. So would you mind sharing that story with the folks that are listening?
Sure. It still gives me chills right now when you mentioned that. So this was in the height of lockdown, right? This was when the whole country was locked down. Mm-hmm. And uncertainty and fear. And I'm a big music fan, right? We have concerts at every True event, and I'm always looking for meaningful songs to play during events. And I found this song called I Need It. It's by a guy named Johnny Balick. Okay. And Johnny actually lives in Chattanooga, only about an hour and a half from here, and will not return my texts anymore. He's a funky artist, but crazy talented. And so this song is, if you go listen to it, Johnny Balick, I Need It. It's about a relationship, and it's the woman he needs and why. But for whatever reason, I was like, wow, if you think about like that thing you need right now that you miss because everybody's locked down, and you think about that thing, you close your eyes and you like really think about it as he's singing the song, I Need It. It was like magic. I was like, oh my gosh, it sounds like he's saying like, I need that margarita at my favorite Mexican restaurant, or I need a blowout from my hairstylist, or I need a wine night with my friends on the patio.
Yeah.
All these things that people were missing. And so we did a video where everybody in True thought of that thing. They wrote what they needed on a piece of paper, and they took a picture with it. And then we, played that song and sort of made a montage video of all these people from all around the country saying what they missed and needed. And people still cry. They were part of that.
Yeah.
And it became, True grew like 40% during COVID, 2020, because of, we had a virtual event that's around that same time where we, it was a 4 or 5 day virtual event. It was the whole week. We had concerts on our Facebook page every day. There was something like 32 or 38 breakout sessions. We didn't know any better. It was our first virtual event, and it was complete insanity. Actually called Virtual Insanity Learning Academy. It's still called that.
It was like the virtual benefits of Woodstock or something.
Yeah,
like this,
it was.
This 5-day festival.
And what was crazy is people loved it because we were starving
for
connectivity.
Man. Yeah.
We have a monthly compliance webinar for our firms. We started having weekly compliance webinars during COVID because you had the loans and all the crazy stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
We went from having like 800 firms on a monthly webinar to 38 and 4,800 firms on this weekly webinar. We invested a ton. Anybody that was a prospect of True, I said, hey, this is desperate times. Just get on this webinar, invite your clients. And so we hired Britt during that time, our creative director. We started doing these sketches. But yeah, that I Need It video was maybe a cornerstone of that provided like, hey, we can reach everybody in these organizations virtually instead of just the ones that can travel.
Well, what connected or resonated with me about it is like you recognized during that time when it wasn't the big things necessarily that people were missing. It was the very little things, those subtle things that you do on a regular basis that you didn't realize if they were stripped away from you, how much you missed it, or how much it was a part of you, or how much joy was derived from it because it was just normal during that time. And then when it was gone, you're like, wow, that thing is the thing I miss, and like I want it back, right? And so when you play that video, I'm going, okay, what he was able to do with that is obviously you create the emotional swell out of it, but it was also just people's recognition that there's very simple things out of my life that I find joy from, and I need to remember that, right? As long as I'm around the people that I want to be around, my family, my friends, it was just super cool, man. And it was like, you showed me a few of the videos, some of them funny, some of them were more oriented around the conference, but that was the one that I like, that was very memorable to me.
Cool,
I can see why it was so, it resonated so well internally. So Scott, why don't we do this? I feel like we could fill another podcast, you and I sitting down. We've talked so much, but why don't we do this? Like, why don't we do closing thoughts? We talked about what you think the future of True will look like, but maybe just sort of closing thoughts about industry, where we're going, and maybe if you were to look back and do a retrospective on your life, what you'd kind of say was your stamp on this industry.
Man, retrospective, I would have been way kinder my whole career, way more kind. Whatever the best way to say that is, you get that.
I think they both work.
Much less selfish and much more giving. Not to a point where you get walked on or things like that. I actually want to trounce our competition, right? Like I'm not this super nice guy like that. I also believe that makes them better, which makes me better. But in retrospect, if you can, some of the things we've said, being kind to people, maintaining curiosity, helping people solve problems. I can't. Someone asked me recently what traits I wanted my kids to have. Like if I passed away, what did if you could only name 3 traits, I was like, gosh, they have to be kind to people, right? I would love it if they were curious about life because that fuels happiness.
Amen. Yeah.
And certainly you want them to be happy. I can't think of anything more than that. Like if that was my legacy, that I was kind and I was curious, funny, I I think I'm pretty funny. I like that.
You're funny. You are funny.
I would like it if someone said, I'd really like to sense of humor.
Yeah.
The future of the industry, it's much more complex. One thing that this crazy acquisitions that have gone on the past 10 years, a lot of consolidation in our industry, legislation increase, compliance burdens. It's super complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's elevated. All those things have elevated the deliverables from professionals in our industry.
Yeah.
All those things, even the consolidation has probably elevated the service that clients are receiving. So it's going to continue to be a smart person's game. I think that those people who are dedicated and growth oriented and curious, they're always going to have an advantage. For True, I hope that we can continue that legacy of helping people grow. I mean, it's just I think as a society we chase money and things and most of our lives, and then if you're lucky enough to get those things, you're like, well, it was really about the pursuit of it.
Yeah.
It really wasn't about the
even growth speaks to, you're not talking about necessarily just financial growth, right? You're talking about growth in your ability set, growth in your relationships, your network, and what you're doing for other people. That's growth.
Yeah.
Simultaneously to the idea of making more money. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. You ask good questions, man.
Well, thanks, man.
I want to go back and think about them. I might send you.
We'll just re-record the whole thing. Well, same questions.
Rewind this.
Yeah, no. But Scott, I'll just say this, man. This was a lot of fun. I've done a couple of road versions of the podcast. I've never had the level of, I'd say, hospitality. It is more just because it was just you and me getting a chance to connect for a couple of days, spend a lot of time together, just talk shop and, learn. We have a pretty similar sense of humor, probably have a pretty similar philosophy on the business. And I just want to say, usually people kind of thank me afterwards. Like, I want to say thank you for bringing me to Guntersville, Alabama, introducing me to this beautiful city and this lake view. I'm hopeful we get to do it again soon, and maybe even have you down to Dallas next time to do round 2.
Yeah, man. I will say thank you for coming. It's been fun. It stretches me. You do ask good questions.
Thanks, man.
We rehearsed some of this, and you asked some really difficult questions that we didn't rehearse, and I love that. And let me say this in closing. I cleared my calendar for this.
I appreciate that. Me too.
I am no busier than anyone else, but I got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do that, but that's part of being kind, right? If I would have been on the phone the whole time you were here and distracted and all that kind of fun stuff, you would not have had a good experience.
Well, thank you, man.
And that's an encouragement for everybody out there to put their phone down and engage, look people in the eye and build relationships.
Yeah.
That's what we're leaving behind.
Yep.
Legacy is the people that we leave with that kindness and curiosity. So I appreciate you taking the time hanging out, man.
Yeah, likewise. All right, we did it. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. Check them out at truecaptive.com.